Today we're going to take a look at NASCAR versus AT&T. This is going to get a little business technical, but hey, I have a bachelor's of business administration, so let's go. Some people will say AT&T bought Singular Wireless, and that's sort of the case, but not really. It looks like AT&T bought Singular, but it's more complicated. There's technically two companies involved that were called AT&T. AT&T Wireless, and then AT&T Inc. So let's take a look at what happened from 2005 to 2007 with AT&T, Singular, and NASCAR. First, some background on how we got here. Singular Wireless was a sponsor for Richard Childress Racing's number 31 car starting in 2001. Now, when Nextel signed on for the naming rights to the Cup Series in 2003, NASCAR banned telecommunication companies from sponsoring in the series. Because as part of the agreement with Nextel, there was an exclusivity agreement. Nextel would later merge with Sprint and the sponsorship would change to the Sprint name. However, Alltel and Singular were grandfathered in as they were previously in the sport. Alltel and Singular were allowed to continue sponsoring for an unlimited amount of time provided they didn't switch teams or increase their position of sponsorship, meaning secondary to primary on the car. This was pushed by NASCAR as they felt it important to protect companies that had already invested in the sport. So now for the technical business stuff. In April 2000, SBC Communications and Bell South started a joint venture creating the Singular Wireless brand. Bell South owned 40% and SBC had a controlling interest owning 60%. In 2005, SBC Communications had acquired AT&T Wireless for $16.5 billion. On November 18, 2005, the acquisition was finalized, and the company was renamed AT&T Inc. So basically, old AT&T, no more, now new AT&T, formerly SBC. The company still maintained the corporate structure of SBC, so basically SBC just changed their name to AT&T while acquiring the assets of the old AT&T. On December 29, 2006, AT&T Inc., formerly SBC Communications, acquired Bell South for $86 billion. So Singular was no longer a joint venture, as SBC, which was later renamed AT&T, and Bell South have now become one company under the AT&T name. AT&T Inc., formerly SBC, would now benefit financially from all of Bell South's business, not just the Singular joint venture. This also allowed the AT&T brand to be utilized on all Bell South brands and products as they were now the same company. And as such, in late 2006, AT&T Inc. announced it would phase out the Singular brand, rebranding it to AT&T, starting in 2007 to create a unified brand. This allowed the growth of the company's wireless network with the greater AT&T brand image and recognition. AT&T Inc. was in the process of discontinuing the Singular brand in order to have one unified brand, and thus rebranded the 31 car to the AT&T logos, and NASCAR did not like this. NASCAR claimed that this was a violation of the contract they had with Sprint and Nextel. Sprint argued that showing AT&T on the car devalued their exclusivity naming rights contract with NASCAR. On March 16, 2007, AT&T Inc. filed a lawsuit against NASCAR to allow the addition of the AT&T logos to the car. On May 18th, AT&T won a preliminary injunction to allow the logos on the car for the All-Star race. The judge said that AT&T was likely to win the lawsuit. The judge's reasoning was the contract did not strictly prohibit logo or name changes in the event of a company merger, and the continuation of the Singular logo without AT&T would create confusion that Singular is now AT&T. NASCAR filed an appeal, which was later denied. On June 17th, NASCAR filed a $100 million counter lawsuit against AT&T Inc. NASCAR was claiming damages from the AT&T logos on the 31 car, and they claimed AT&T Inc. was wrongfully interfering with Sprint's exclusivity deal. NASCAR said that it wanted all telecommunication companies out of the sport by 2008. The other companies currently in NASCAR was Alltel sponsoring Ryan Newman's car. On August 13th, a federal appeals court ruled that NASCAR could ban the AT&T logos. Burton's car showed up to Bristol in a plain black hauler with just the number 31 on it. The car had the same orange and black paint scheme, but with no logos. Burton wore a plain orange and black fire suit, and the 31 team wore plain gray. NASCAR said the car would have failed inspection had it been present with AT&T logos. RCR could have run Burton's car with the singular logos on, but chose not to, as that would provide no marketing or financial advantage for AT&T, as the singular brand was becoming extinct. AT&T claimed they submitted many different car designs, but NASCAR said no to all of them. AT&T spokesman Mark Siegel said, quote, "NASCAR left us no other choice. Because we love the sport, we are willing to take this approach, which literally does nothing for our brand image or identity. We don't want to disappoint the great NASCAR fans, and we want to continue to support Jeff Burton and Richard Childress Racing," end quote. NASCAR spokesman Ramsey Poston said, quote, "AT&T has been dishonest with the fans and with NASCAR, and it's time to stop. NASCAR has approved several paint schemes. They chose to run the logoless car. It's RCR's decision," end quote. Burton and RCR would run a blank car the next week at Auto Club 2. Richard Childress said, quote, "AT&T will spend millions of dollars promoting their products, and in that product, they're helping promote our sport. If they get beat and end up leaving, not only will RCR have a loss, but the sport will lose too," end quote. On September 7th, NASCAR announced that Richard Childress Racing and Sprint Nextel had reached an agreement allowing the continuation of the AT&T sponsorship on Burton's car through 2008, but the RCR would have to find a new sponsor for 2009. AT&T's contract with Richard Childress Racing was set to go through 2010. Dave Garver, Executive Director for Business Development and Wireless Sponsorship for AT&T's wireless unit, had this to say, quote, "This agreement is the right step taken at the right time. It provides a clear path forward for the sport and its fans. For Richard Childress Racing and Jeff Burton, and for AT&T, which can use its brand on its number 31 car," end quote. Richard Childress would replace AT&T in 2009 with Caterpillar as Jeff Burton's sponsor, who previously sponsored Jeff Burton's brother Ward Burton. The problem here is that Sprint Nextel is paying NASCAR money to allow them to sponsor the series on an exclusive basis, which is a form of marketing for Sprint. Sprint has a valid point that AT&T does devalue their contract, but AT&T is trying to rebrand their product lines into one unified brand after several mergers and acquisitions, so they also have a valid argument. It would make sense to not allow the change if the singular brand still existed, but it doesn't. So I think AT&T should have been allowed to change the logos. NASCAR argued that the grandfather clause only extended to the singular brand and could not be rebranded if a company was acquired by a new company. The thing is that AT&T wasn't really technically a new company. It just rebranded after two previous owners of the singular brand merged to form one company. One of the owners of the singular brand bought AT&T, and then the two companies that were in a joint venture merged to form a single company. And so it was no longer a joint venture. They then felt that the AT&T brand was more valuable than the singular brand, and that thus rebranded singular to AT&T. AT&T technically didn't buy Singular. One of the Singular owners bought AT&T. The merger and acquisitions were part of a much bigger business move than just Singular becoming AT&T. AT&T did not buy Singular in an attempt to get into NASCAR. NASCAR should not be allowed to not allow companies to merge and discontinue a brand and force them to not be able to rebrand. AT&T would be throwing away money if they continued displaying the Singular logo and would gain nothing of it, as there's no marketing value in advertising a non-existent brand. NASCAR could then ban the company from sponsoring in the future after their current contract runs out to comply with their sponsors and exclusivity contracts if they wish. NASCAR is trying to govern their sport here solely off their rule book rather than actual legal principles. The problem with NASCAR's counter lawsuit is that they're saying they were damaged from AT&T with a 31 car being able to run the AT&T logos on the car after the court's order. The problem here is you can't claim damages from AT&T's actions coming from a court order. NASCAR has a right to enter into exclusivity contracts and grandfather clauses, but can't just throw them away whenever it suits them. The grandfather clause never had a time period to remove companies from the sport. So now you've heard from me, and now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on NASCAR versus AT&T? Should AT&T have been allowed to change the logo on the car? Should NASCAR sign exclusivity rights contracts and limit companies from sponsoring? So let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, so long everybody.